Have you ever looked at a relationship, maybe from the outside, maybe even your own, and just thought, why? Why do they stay? It is one of the most gut-wrenching, confusing questions we can ask, especially when it's so clear that a relationship is causing pain. Well, today, we're going to get into it, because the answer has almost nothing to do with logic and everything to do with our wiring.
And let's just clear the air on this right from the jump. If any of this sounds familiar to you, it is not because you are weak. It's not a flaw in your character. What we're about to unpack is this incredibly powerful process where your own nervous system, your biology, literally gets hijacked. So this isn't about willpower. We're talking about a biological hook, plain and simple.
So, where does a dynamic like this even begin? Well, it often starts with this feeling of being on a wild, emotional roller coaster, a sensation that some people call emotional whiplash.
And it is so disorienting. I mean, one day you are on this pedestal. You're the greatest thing that's ever happened to them, a soulmate. And then the next, maybe for some tiny mistake you didn't even know you made, you're suddenly the villain. You're the source of all their unhappiness. This constant swing back and forth, it just shreds your sense of reality. It leaves you in this state of total confusion.
This cycle, this pattern of extreme highs and devastating lows is exactly what forges what we're here to talk about, the trauma bond. It's this deep psychological tie where good times and bad times get so tangled up that the person causing you all this pain, well, they also become the only person who seems to offer any relief. And it's that bond that makes the idea of leaving feel not just hard but nearly impossible.
Now, here's where it gets even deeper. For a lot of people, the tendency to get caught in these bonds as an adult isn't some random thing. It's often built on a blueprint that was laid down a long, long time ago, in our very first relationships.
There's this really powerful idea in psychology called repetition compulsion. And basically, it's our brain's subconscious drive to recreate the emotional situations from our childhood. Now, let's be super clear. You are not seeking out pain on purpose. Not at all. Your brain is just drawn to what feels familiar, even if that familiar feeling was chaos or neglect. It's like we're trying to go back and finally win a game we lost as a kid.
And this plays out in a few key ways. We find ourselves longing for that approval or love we never quite got. At the same time, we're terrified of feeling that old hurt again. Then sometimes we unconsciously end up doing to our partner what was once done to us. And finally, we might even find ourselves eliciting from them the exact reaction we're afraid of, almost to prove our fears right. It's this really complex unconscious dance.
So let's break down how this childhood blueprint actually gets built out in an adult relationship. Because what can feel like your own unique, private chaos is often a frighteningly predictable pattern. In fact, this pattern is so predictable that experts have broken it down into 7 distinct stages. It starts with that intoxicating love bombing and can go all the way to a devastating loss of self. And honestly, just seeing these stages laid out can be a huge weight off your shoulders. It's proof that you weren't going crazy. You were following a script that you never even knew existed.
It almost always starts like a fairy tale. This is love bombing. And it's more than just being nice. It's this over-the-top 24/7 adoration. Constant texts, lavish praise, telling you they've never felt this way before after just a few weeks. It feels incredible, like you've finally been truly seen, which of course makes it almost impossible to recognize as a major red flag.
And then, once they have your trust, the script flips. The little criticisms start. And from there, it often escalates into gaslighting. And this is a really sinister kind of manipulation, where they just flat out deny your reality. They'll tell you, "I never said that," or "You're just being too sensitive," over and over until you genuinely start to doubt your own mind. And that, of course, just makes you more dependent on their version of reality.
Okay, but that still leaves the biggest question on the table. If this cycle is so awful, why is it so incredibly hard to just walk away? Why does it feel like an addiction? Well, the answer isn't a metaphor. It's literally in your brain chemistry.
The mechanism behind this addiction is something called intermittent reinforcement. And all that means is that the rewards, the good times, the affection, they're given out totally unpredictably. See, it's not the constant negativity that gets you hooked. It's the unpredictable, random moments of kindness that create the most powerful behavioral hook known to science.
And this is the perfect way to think about it. It really is just like a slot machine. I mean, if you pulled the lever and it never ever paid out, you'd just walk away, right? And if it paid out every single time, you'd probably get bored. But because it pays out sometimes, randomly,
You get hooked. You keep pulling that lever, totally convinced that the next big jackpot, that return of the good version of them, is just one more try away. So let's look at what's happening chemically. During all those bad times, the criticism, the silent treatment, the fights, your body is on high alert. It is just marinating in stress hormones, especially cortisol. You feel that knot in your stomach, that anxiety, that desperation for things to just be okay again. And then, bam, the switch flips. They apologize, they shower you with affection again, and your brain gets this huge euphoric flood of relief chemicals like dopamine. It doesn't just feel good, it feels like this powerful, warm wave of relief that washes all the pain away. It feels like a drug.
And this is the absolute crux of it. The other person becomes both the poison and the antidote. You become biochemically hooked on the high of making up, because it's the only relief you can get from the low that they themselves created. So when we say breaking free feels like a withdrawal, that's not just a feeling. Chemically, that is exactly what is happening in your brain.
Okay, so understanding that chemical addiction is the key to our final and maybe most important takeaway today. And that's learning how to tell the difference between the chaotic, buzzy feeling of a trauma bond and the quiet, steady feeling of real intimacy. Here is the big mistake that keeps so many of us stuck. We confuse intensity with intimacy. If you grew up around a lot of chaos, then the drama, the screaming matches, the breaking up and making up, that high-energy, high-stakes feeling can actually feel like passion. It can feel like love, because that state of high alert is what feels like home. And you can see the difference so clearly here. Intensity is fueled by fear, anxiety, and high drama. It's that constant push-pull, that feeling of walking on eggshells. True intimacy, though, is the polar opposite. It's built on a foundation of safety and respect. It's consistent. It's patient. It feels calm. They don't just feel different. They are chemically and emotionally different worlds. Now, this is why healing can be so tricky. Because when you finally get away from that chaos and you meet someone who is kind and consistent and respectful, your nervous system might actually freak out a little bit. It can interpret that sense of peace and safety as boring. It feels flat because your brain is still jonesing for that next hit of dopamine from the makeup cycle.
But here is the reframe we all need to learn. Boring is beautiful. Boring is safety. Boring is peace. After surviving years of what feels like technicolor chaos, the simple, steady, grayscale of a calm Tuesday night with someone you trust, that's not a step down. That is an absolute luxury. It's the sign that your nervous system can finally stand down.
So, I'll just leave you with this thought. What if we could actually retrain our brains to chase a different kind of reward? After years of being hooked on the roller coaster of chaos, maybe, just maybe, the most satisfying and lasting high we could ever find is the feeling of genuine peace.